So here we are now, and now the media will have to turn from self-examination of how it covered the campaign to in 60 some odd days covering a Trump administration. So what do you think is going to be the challenge, the difference for the media in covering a Trump presidency compared to the 44 previous presidencies we've had?
I mean, two fundamental ones. Showing what is not normal and is really terrible without overreacting to every small thing that flixes that as though it's the apocalypse, which I think the media did a pretty lousy job of in full over the course of the election. A few places with bigger budgets and longer attention spans did better. And the critique of the White House press has always been that it's half co-opted, that you work in and basically in some ways for the White House, and you need your access, you need to get called on at the pressers and get your TV time. So maybe Trump blows up some of those dynamics. Maybe a lot of those traditions break down right away. And then Trump is hoping that, as he did in the campaign, that the media oversteps, complains in the wrong ways, and that he gets to counterpunch them, and play on the suspicion that most Americans at this point have of the press. It worries me a lot. That's a tremendous breakdown in just having responsive institutions and a president who has to answer like certain baseline questions.
So there are trends, and then there's a clear break from them. I mean, one thing we saw at the Trump rallies in some cases was reporters being harassed, threatened, physically intimidated. Megyn Kelly says she got death threats. Do you think, Sarah, that kind of thing ends now that the campaign period's done, or do reporters really have to think about a very different kind of personal environment in which they're going to work?
Well, I think this era will clarify for journalists that being a journalist is about being permanently in opposition and not being at home at the White House or anywhere else. I actually think most journalists know that, and I think that television news is maybe it occupies a fuzzy realm between entertainment and journalism, and it's a little different. But I mean, I think that this is a good opportunity for journalists to just be relentless. I mean, this is a sloppy administration. It's already sloppy as hell, and you have people going in and out of the transition team. You have leaks all over the place. As soon as someone's hired, they're fired. And notably, Trump has already started betraying all of the promises that he made to his base, right? So his team is full of lobbyists. He said he was going to drain the swamp. He has one meeting with Obama, and he's like, well, I'd like to keep 2 pieces of the Affordable Care Act. This guy is not going to stand for any of the things that his people wanted, which is not to say that he's not going to be terrifying. And I think it's the press's job to sort of relentlessly expose that. I will say that what's scary under Trump is that he seems to have a really interesting relationship with libel law, in that he would like to see it expanded in America as it is, for example, in the UK, which is terrifying because, as we saw with the Gawker case, if you sue a small media organization and you have a lot of money, you can put them out of business, and that's one oppositional force down. That's terrifying. And the last thing I'll say is having Steve Bannon, who ran Breitbart, still sort of runs Breitbart, I guess, who is a white nationalist who will be in charge, not in charge of, but presumably of some access to the massive surveillance and security apparatus that the United States has, and which Obama supported and built out. That is very terrifying for, I think, any media organization, certainly for a smaller lefty one like mine. And so the degree to which we all become very serious about things like encryption and keeping our journalism safe, I think that's going to escalate enormously, and it's hard to judge exactly what that'll look like.
So, Collier, you mentioned libel laws. Another law that's pretty important is freedom of information. And, presidents and governments generally are not too great about complying with that. But the tactic we've always had is to shame them, to say, if they don't give you the secrets, to say they're keeping secrets. But Donald Trump defied all precedent by not releasing his tax reform. So I think that weapon is gone, right? Shame is not going to work against this administration when it comes to secrecy.
Gonna FOIA you, Trump?
He'll be
I'll
like,
sue
what's
you.
that?
Right.
Well, no, I'll sue you.
So how do we make Trump transparent?
I have no idea. That's actually just my answer.
I mean, he doesn't have rules. It's like,
Yeah.
there's
It's just
exactly
chaos.
So there's a bigger question when it comes to media and Trump, which is that since the election, certainly in newsrooms I've interacted with, journalists I've talked to, there is a palpable sense of shock, even among reporters who aren't particularly political. And there have been public expressions of that, I think, by some news agencies because of the Trump relationship with the press. And some of that has, frankly, I think you could objectively say, broken with the tradition of being kind of removed from commenting on who's won an election in that fashion. Sarah, do you think that people in the press are generally going to retreat to their traditional approach to a president like Trump, or have we entered a new era where people are going to take sides much more openly than they have in the past?
I've actually been very disappointed with what I've heard many members of the press saying upon Trump's election. Collier and I were talking about this, which is, people saying sort of right off the bat, well, the election is over, we have to give him a chance, this is how American democracy works, we survived Nixon, some people didn't, some people didn't survive any bad administration we've ever had. People didn't survive Reagan, people didn't survive Clinton's cuts to welfare. There are people who suffer. And is the press going to go under tomorrow? No. Actually, most members of the press know that we're about to enter a big fight with Trump. It'll probably be good for us for a while. There's a lot to be afraid of, but fundamentally, most of the press cannot be destroyed overnight by Trump coming in and blustering and yelling on Twitter or even threatening journalists at rallies. But the people who are going to suffer are, so if he gets in and immediately gets rid of DACA, you have thousands and thousands of people who put their names on a list, which is now going to be handed to Trump, and he's going to withdraw his protection. He'll destroy their lives.
So Collier, do you think that the next 4 years, or however long the Trump presidency lasts, might change the definition of advocacy journalism, right? Which is obviously a freighted term, but if those are the stories we're covering, I guess a lot of people who might not consider themselves advocacy journalists will become that, if we still call it that.
Yeah, I think if you look at MSNBC, which full disclosure, worked for 4 years, went through during the Bush era this giant, they did phenomenally, right? So then once Obama was elected, it was, oh gosh, how do we rejigger everything? We're not doing well. We're failing in the ratings. The ratings are horrible. Nobody wants to watch us because Americans are complacent. Liberal Americans, I will go out on a ledge and say we're complacent during the Obama era. And now I think MSNBC is probably going to revert back to this is the progressive liberal place for politics. Where it had been abandoning that identity for the last, I'd say, year and a half. So I think you're going to see a shift back to advocacy journalism.
Harry, is Trump your president?
Sure, he's my terrible president. And I think that's a useful way. I don't need to wait for him to start doing terrible things to know that. He's promised a lot, and he's working out ways to act on them now. I think treating him in a normal sense, this is what a president should do, and then holy smokes, this guy is a healthy and calm way to point to that space.
So, does the media have a responsibility to make sure the right conversation takes place, and how does it do that?
I think it's pious to say that we control the tone of a conversation. Our job is to find information that other people can't find on their own. And so if one thing Trump is going to do is turn this into some crazy oligarchic situation where his children are running his business under his name, making deals abroad, he's running the government, everyone has security clearance. There's a lot of material for us to work with and to provide to people. It is a job of organizers, activists, to organize people around that information, and they can decide what kind of tone they want to take. I don't think that's a thing we dictate. People know their material circumstances, and they want to have power in their own lives. They want things to get better. It's our job to be thinking, okay, what kind of information do people need? What do we contribute to the sorts of motion happening in this country? So I don't you know, obviously if we go around writing only polemical pieces, that's actually just like not useful to anybody. I don't think it contributes well to the tone, but it also doesn't contribute to anything else. Whereas if we're like doing the work that is our job, like I think that's a contribution and other people can worry about the tone.
What's your role beginning January 20th at noon? Advocate, journalist, some combination of the two. How are you going to approach it?
Report things, find new facts, put facts together in important combinations, get that new information out there because that's what the press is for and what it's good at doing. So that Americans who want to organize, who want to be active, who want to find ways to resist what I think are going to be some very dark years ahead, have those material. And so that Americans who don't see that way can also look at and fairly judge those things. But if we're doing our job, reporting and putting out information, like the rest is up to the American people, you know?